How can you hone your stagecraft as a performing musician? Also, how can you continuously improve your creativity and inspiration when songwriting? We'll have some great tips on these points and more in today's episode. Welcome to Half Hour Mentor. My name is Ian Cleverden and welcome to my audio podcast series designed to help anyone who is looking for inspiration to develop their creative skills, whether professionally or as a hobbyist. In this series, I'm focusing on the creative arts. I'm catching up with musicians, artists, authors and actors, but also speaking to some in the directing and strategic management fields of this wide-ranging industry. All of my guests have been carefully chosen, as each one of them has an interesting backstory from which we can all learn. If you're new to the series, please follow it on whichever podcast platform you use and go back and have a listen to the rich archive of over 30 interviews and compilations. In this episode, I'm delighted to welcome British singer-songwriter and storyteller Reg Meuross. Reg was described by the stalwart of the UK folk scene, Mike Harding, as one of the finest singer-songwriters this country has produced. The breadth and depth of his material is unparalleled in contemporary folk. Songs about forgotten heroes, famous names, folk legends, the climate emergency, tales from the kitchen sink, and news from the world stage. If something needs to be sung about, then Reg has a song for it. I first met him many years ago when doing sound for him at some of his live performances in northwest England, and became an instant fan, not just because of the power of his songs, but also because of his storytelling in between the songs, which really helps bring his musical work to life. He's got such a great presence on stage. I caught up with Reg via Zoom in between concerts for his new song cycle, Stolen from God. It's a powerful musical work which zooms in on the transatlantic slave trade. You can find out all about this and his prolific back catalogue by visiting his website, regmeuross.com. I've also put together a Spotify playlist of some of my favourite songs of Reg, if you're not familiar with his work. You can find the link to this playlist in the show notes. This series is completely independent and ad-free, so if you like what you hear and you'd like to help cover some of the production costs, including custard creams and Vimto, then please feel free to donate what you can via the Corona Sound website. A link to this can also be found in the show notes. And so to the interview. Reg Meuross, welcome to Half Hour Mentor.
Pleasure to be here, Ian. Good to see you.
Thanks very much. One question I ask at the beginning of all my episodes, and that is, let's go back to your teenage years. What was the very first job you wanted to do?
I pretty much knew I was going to be a musician, really. I was writing when I was very young. I was making up tunes when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And so writing was... I never thought beyond that. I just thought I would be a writer and I'd probably be a musician. You know, I kind of half-heartedly learned a bit of guitar. I learned a bit of bass guitar and I thought, well, I'll do that, you know. And, you know, that stage, you don't think too seriously about it. You know, you're too busy trying to get girlfriends, you know. And so at
the age of 5.
Yeah, I'm thinking about sort of teen years now, but certainly, that was my plan, and you know, I was already in a little group at the age of 16. I was already in a trio, so it's kind of pretty much mapped out for me, really.
Who were your influences at the young age musically?
I can remember going to see the Beatles films. You know, I can remember A Hard Day's Night. I can remember Help and the soundtracks to them and those albums coming out. I remember I had a friend called Stephen Pepper, and I have a really, really strong memory of arriving at school, secondary school, and Stephen coming up to me and saying, "Guess what Beatles' new album is called?" You know, of course it was Sgt. Pepper. And you know, so that was a huge influence on me. But I think the breakthrough in terms of becoming a singer-songwriter was undoubtedly Dylan. I loved harmony, and I can, if you played me a song I'd never heard before, I could pretty much guess the harmony as it went. Just instinctively, I could work out where the song was going to go, and I could pretty much make up a harmony on the spot. And I remember doing that to Beatles songs. So the Beatles songs were very, very much a musical education. You know, it was very much song structure, mood, theme, you know, and stuff like that. But then when I heard Dylan, which was again was very early on, it's probably times they were changing, and I just thought, this is me, this is what I want to do. I want to be independent. I want to be I want to be the kind of singer-songwriter who makes up his own songs and goes and sings them without a fuss. I wasn't into I didn't have a big sound in my head. I didn't have that big Sergeant Pepper sound in my head. That wasn't the way I thought. The way I thought was delivering my thoughts and my sharing, and meeting and communicating with people, really. And I can remember the big breakthrough was Positively 4th Street, which was, You Got a Lot of Nerve to Say You Are My Friend. And that album, Like a Rolling Stone, and hearing those songs, I think I genuinely heard rock and roll for the first time in those songs, and I was subjected to Chuck Berry and the Rolling Stones and all that. But for me, the sound of rock and roll is the sound of Like a Rolling Stone. That's that kind of big wooden electroacoustic sort of sound with a big old jangly piano in the background, and those lyrics, You got a nerve to say you are my friend, when I was down, you just stood there grinning. That for me, that said to me, that was my key to the world, really. That was my key to the songwriting world, because it told me that you can sing about anything you want, and if you can communicate your thoughts in that theme, in that song, you can do what you like. You can make up your own themes, and that was massively liberating for me. So they were the influences. I mean, I was listening to Gordon Giltrap, I was listening to Tom Paxton, the Stones, all the Tremolos, all those English groups. Those English groups were a big influence on me later on in harmony terms. Everly Brothers, Johnny Cash, a little bit of country. I was lucky. My parents were really into music. My dad was really into the crooners, so my house was full of Nat King Cole. I loved Nat King Cole as a child, and Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, Perry Como, Dean Martin, those big manly singers, and I loved that. I loved that sound, and he would go to his mate's house and they'd listen to country music. They'd listen to Hank Williams, although I didn't know it was Hank Williams at the time. It was many years later when I realized that I'd been listening to Hank Williams, for quite a long time without knowing it. And then my mum was into the shows. She was really into, so we had the Great Caruso, we had Oklahoma. My mum was musical. My grandparents were musical. My grandparents were opera singers. So we had that, I was surrounded by it.
Very much in the family. Yeah, very much.
Yeah, very much in the family. Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad was a bugler in the army. And so I can remember one of the first things I ever learned was the last post. And my dad would play it, and he'd play it on the harmonica as well. And so whenever I picked up an instrument, I'd learn how to play the last post.
All right. So I'll be looking out for that next time I see you live. I'll be looking at.
See what I can do. Yeah.
Excellent. Obviously, music was all around the family, very much influenced, as you've said. How did it then transpire into you? What was your first leap into being a professional musician?
Like I said, I had a little trio when I was sort of 16, 17, and then my girlfriend at the time had a brother who was living in North Devon, and I went with her to visit them one weekend. And it was a place called Croyd, a village called Croyd in North Devon. And there were 3 cottages as part of this sort of complex, and they were full of hippies. And they were all, they were all smoking dope and playing music and doing what hippies do, and being away from their parents, being liberated and free. And so that appealed to me enormously. And I remember going to one of the houses and sitting up until 3:00 in the morning playing guitars and singing Crosby, Stills and Nash songs and Neil Young songs, and all that, and Dylan and stuff. And that I decided pretty much there and then, I think I was probably 16, probably 17, I think, I decided there and then I was gonna move to North Devon. So I did, and I moved to North Devon, and then I started to do little cafe gigs and stuff like that, and that developed. I had a band called Art, which was linked to Hawkwind. We did lots of gigs with Hawkwind, although that was never my kind of music. It was somebody famous to hang out with, and to get seen. So we did gigs with them. And in fact, my bass player at the time, Harvey Bainbridge, he ended up joining Hawkwind, and so did the keyboard player, Paul Hales. Paul Hales, the keyboard player. They both ended up in Hawkwind. But that kind of led me into a life of performance, into I started a theatre company. I worked with the Beeford Arts Centre there, doing all sorts of things for them. Musical events, village fetes, Kayleys, you name it. I was doing it all, and at the same time I was doing solo gigs and working with the band. And so and then eventually I moved to London, and I moved to London in late 70s, the year of punk actually, 77. I moved to London. And then I went before it with a vengeance. Then I started to play lots of London venues. And that was a good time really to be in London. There was a lot going on. There was a lot of clubs, and that was it. I was in London for 20 years. So I suppose, and then the big success for me came in the late 80s when I formed the Panic Brothers. I'd had record deals. I had a deal with EMI, I had a deal with Arista. We were on EMI with Duran Duran. We were pop stars for a short period, very, very unsuccessful pop stars, but with nice big fat advances in our pockets.
Very good.
Those are the days when everything was run by the corporates, and there was no such homemade recordings, And then the Panics came along, and then we really took off. The Panics was a duo. It was me and Richard Morton.
That was the first time I came across you, actually. I sat watching Friday Night Live, and you and Richard Morton.
Yeah, we were it, really. There was probably three main music acts on the comedy circuit. At that time, the comedy circuit grew out of the pub rock circuits, and we were right on the cusp of it, and we were perfect for both, because we did what they called social realism meets the Everly Brothers. We wore natty black suits, polo ties. I had my hair dyed blonde. Richard had his hair dyed black. We looked the business, and we did this fantastic tight two-part harmonies. If you saw us, you'll know what we did. Yeah, very punky, very fast, and perfect for its time, because it was quick, and we could get into a venue as quick as a solo comedian could get into a venue and do our songs and get back out again. And we toured with Lenny Henry. We did a national tour with Lenny Henry. We played all the clubs, and because of that, the pub rock thing, we were playing with the Balham Alligators, with Juice on the Loose, all these big London roots bands, Americana roots bands. We were doing stuff with them. We got signed to Topic. We signed to Topic's subsidiary label, Special Delivery. We were actually the first signing to them. So we were rocking really, and we were doing the folk circuit, which was interesting. At that time, what we did, it was almost sort of genreless in a way. It was just really good music, and it was funny. We did a lot of funny stuff. I made a mess of a dirty weekend. No matter who you're doing it with, take Johnny to bed. My Sony Walkman just walked out on me. High quality stuff, folks. For
the listeners, if they don't know, if you just search Panic Brothers on YouTube, and there's some great
you'll
clips.
See it there.
Yeah,
I mean, we did a lot of social realism, in debt, living in a bivouac, songs, but all in this fabulous tight harmony. So that was really when we both, I guess, Richard came to prominence on the comedy circuit, and I found my feet in the club circuit, the folk clubs and stuff like that.
So Richard went on, because he did a lot of stand-up. He supported Jack D, and he ended up on Channel 5.
Still does. Yeah,
yes,
still
that's
does.
right. So musical stand-up, but then of course
he worked with Bob Monkhouse.
Crikey.
He opened. They started. I think was it the first ever show on Channel 5 or something.
Yes,
one of the very first shows when Channel 5 appeared. Richard was there with Bob Monkhouse doing a show. Yeah,
comedy royalty, absolutely.
I know, comedy royalty. Yeah.
But then, so if we wind that on to even to sort of current times, then there's still a lot of comedy actually in your live set and the way that you talk through some of the stories, but the songs are very much more serious, I would say, and have
Yeah,
real
well,
messages to them. How did that develop?
that was a difficult transition actually at first, because Richard was a funny one. Anybody who saw us will know Richard did all the jokes. I just stayed quiet and played and sang. So when we stopped working together, I only knew that world where you kind of had to be funny to deliver music, or you had to have a bit of patter, and I didn't have any patter really, and so I for a brief period I tried to write sort of funny songs, and I realized I'm no good at writing funny songs. I can't do it. Richard was brilliant, absolutely top class songwriter, could write really funny songs. I couldn't. And so I tried. I don't think I ever did a gig. I kind of tried it out in front of friends, and they all said, "No, no, probably not a good idea, Reg." And then I sort of had a breakthrough. I had a breakthrough with a song about my dad, and it was a true story about my dad. And I knew I was going to sing this very heavy song about my dad who had died, and about how he'd split up with my mother, and then that all made him miserable and so on. And but I told this funny story about my dad, about his kind of eccentric ways, and it got a huge laugh. And I realized that I could, if I stuck to the truth, and just told it in the way that I tell a story, it can get you a long way, And so I did, but I made the truth funny. So that's all I did. I didn't make up jokes. I didn't make up stories. I told things as they were. And, I've got a good ear for hearing, I've been a songwriter all my life. I've got a good ear for hearing catchy phrases, catchy lines and stuff like that, and so I would hear stuff that I noticed other people wouldn't hear, or I'd see stuff that other people wouldn't see. And so I'd make a mental note of it. And then when it came to the gig, it was like, well, on my way to the gig tonight, I saw this lorry loaded chickens, and, and the joke didn't, the comedy didn't really have to have anything to do with the song at all. It was just creating a balance, because like you said, if I just did my songs, people would be in abject misery by about halfway through, and having to listen to all my morbid songs. But by delivering them in this way, it lent a sort of a charm to the songs, and it enabled me to get through a whole evening and be entertaining, which of course is what it's all about in the end, isn't it? Really, it's not a history lesson. It's entertainment,
I have some of my listeners who will be in the situation of in full-time jobs. They're musicians. They're ones that would perform at the open mic sessions, for example. If they're thinking they want to become a full-time performer, what advice would you give them, knowing what you've experienced?
I suppose the main thing is, I've always believed I have something to offer. I've believed in my ability to play, my ability to wake people up, to educate people, to inform people. As you know, a lot of my songs are historical. They're about real characters, real stories, and I get a lot of feedback on that level of people saying, thanks for telling me the story. Thanks for awakening me to the story of Sophie Scholl, the White Rose activist, and so on. And, I believe I have a kind of a purpose, if you're going to go out there and you're going to become a professional musician, what do you have to offer? What do you have to offer that isn't already there? And I'm not saying that you have to be totally unique, because we're all unique anyway. We're all, there's only one Reg Meuross, there's only one Ian Clevedon, and only one Joe Smith getting up on stage for the first time in a open mic in Barnsley, you need to kind of, you need to look at what it is, why you're there. Why do you want to write this song? Why do you want to, what are the audience going to get from that? What are they, okay, your mum thinks you're a good singer, but are you going to be able to entertain these people? Are you going to be able to, there's so many things that a lot of people don't think about. A lot of people just think, well, if I can get a chance to get on that stage, then that'd be great. And they get a chance to get on stage, they don't really know what they're doing with it. You don't really know why they're there, and I think it's important to have some some purpose, some belief, you know. Think about why you want to do it. Think about what it is you want to offer. You know, there will be people out there who have great ideas, you know, have great ideas that they want to deliver musically. And then I say, go for it, you know, absolutely go for it. And but make sure, be good at what you do, be practice, study, and try and deliver it in a strong and a powerful way, and you know, show us all what you can do. I think, you know, everybody should have a go, but I don't waste your time and don't waste other people's time.
That's great advice. Let's look at that art of songwriting then, because you know you run a lot of songwriting workshops, despite, you know, and as well as writing a, you know, whole plethora of different styles of song yourself as well. What was the first song you ever wrote? Can you remember what that was?
Yeah, I can. Well, actually, the first tune I ever wrote, I wrote the tune to a poem called "The Runnable Stag," and then I was about 5 or 6 years old. The first song I wrote I was probably about 15, and me and my mate Terry, we wrote a song called "The Cindy Shake." And it was just stupid. It was just, you know, I went to the dance just the other day. Cindy Shake, saw a pretty girl. She was going my way. I can still remember it.
Fantastic.
And it was kind of meaningless. But I thought, I can do this. You know, I can do this. And actually, you know, Terry was a sort of the sleeping partner, really. He wasn't really any good at anything. Not musically anyway. He didn't have any musical bone in his body, but I realized that he was a kind of he was sort of catalyst for me, you know. By working with him, by playing around with him, playing our guitars together, I actually made up a song, and I'm pretty sure I made up all of it. And then I, you know, very shortly after that, I joined this trio, and I was writing songs. I mean, it's interesting to me, the fact that they approached me at the beginning of the week. They said, "We've got a gig at the end of the week at Yateley Folk Club supporting Peter Bellamy. And we know you play a bit of guitar, Reg, and we know you sing. Do you fancy joining and making a trio?" You know, Crosby, Stills and Nash was a big thing then. And I said, "All right then." And I actually learned all I needed to learn. I could already play a bass line. I could do dum 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 dum. I could do that. But I learned the chords. I worked out that I would need 4 chords, pretty much, and a capo, for the gig. We were only doing 20 minutes or something. It was only about 5 or 6 songs. And I realized I learned everything in a week. And within a week, I was up there playing. So, you know, I was kind of meant to do it, really. 2 of those songs, I think we did about 6 songs. 2 of those songs were original ones. One was a kind of cod country song about Abilene or something. And I was listening to Woody Guthrie at the time. And I think I wrote another one that was kind of a Woody Guthrie type blues. And so I sort of, you know, writing was very much part of what I wanted to do. You know, that it wasn't, I didn't just want to get up there and show off. You know, I wanted to communicate. You know, I was a very shy child, which is unusual, really. You know, I remember I would blush at the drop of a hat. I would blush if somebody spoke to me. I'd blush, but I desperately wanted to get up there and play, which is kind of weird, isn't it? You know, it's a weird desire to have when you feel so awkward in public, and I felt very awkward, but something was driving me. There was a vocation there, and it was a means of communication.
How about songwriting in itself then for you? So, you know, you're approaching a project, an album. How do you start? Where do you start from the writing process?
Well, that's the eternal question. What comes first, the lyric or the tune? And with me, probably the idea. There are so many ways of going about it, and there are no rules, you know, so it's quite a difficult one to explain, because one method that I've been using quite a lot recently and never used to do before is to write a lyric first and then make up a tune to it. So I'll have what, you know, essentially is a kind of rhyming poem. And then I'll start to play on the guitar and see what I come up with, see if I can find something that goes with it. And that's one method, you know, that's a fairly straightforward method. But I'd never done that in the past, because I always thought that was a bit of a compromise. I thought if you have your words to begin with, and then you're making up a tune to them, then you're working to the words all the time, and that's kind of limiting you. So in the past, I'd be more inclined to just pick up an instrument, mostly the guitar, and play something that pleased me, play something that I enjoyed. And so I'd play a progression of chords, and then I'd start to sing over the top. And I think, I mean, I'm lucky in that respect that I'm a singer, in that I can make something good pretty much straight away by singing. It might be nonsense words, but I can make up a tune. And what Paul McCartney calls the ham and eggs method. When he wrote Yesterday, he wrote ham and eggs, da, 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 ham and eggs. And I've done that a lot. And then I've recorded that chord progression tune into my phone. So I've kept it. I always recommend that you always do that very first tune, you record it. And then thought about, okay, I can't sing about ham and eggs. What am I going to sing about? Oh, yesterday, and then come up with the lyrics and work that way. So you develop. Another way is to have a really strong title. I have an album called The Goodbye Hat, one of my first albums. And I remember that with that, I just had the line, The Goodbye Hat. And I thought, well, that's a good title, and at the time I was actually seeing quite a lot of Nick Lowe, and I knew him vaguely, and a songwriter I admire greatly, and I was listening to his song "What's So Funny About Peace, Love and Understanding," and I realized that the riff was just basically a G, D, and a C, so I started playing that riff, da 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 da, da G, D, C, and I gradually just slowly came up with, well, she said she didn't want money, I had the title, The Goodbye Hat, so all I had to do really was fill in the space, the space between the beginning and the title. So there's another method. I mean, there are so many different ways, but again, I'd go back to this thing. Think about what it is you want to say. How is this going to benefit you? How is it going to benefit your audience by you putting your time and your energy into this song? Is it going to is it you just want to create a piece of beautiful music? In which case, great. Go for it. Do you want to be a hit songwriter? Have another think about that. If it's just a question of making something beautiful, then great, and all power to you. Just do whatever suits you. I can take every song individually. I can help people. I can do this in songwriting workshops. I can see where people are stuck, and I can help them develop the song and tell them where to go next. And I can tell people how to fill that blank piece of paper, and how to get started. But it's different every time.
I just wanted to ask you about that, actually, with the songwriting workshop. So what do you find with those lesser experienced songwriters that come to your workshop? They obviously want to be better. What's the hardest thing for them to overcome?
Well, there's a whole list of common questions. One is, how do I know when I've finished? And I always find that, and I can remember that, I've had that myself. When do I know a song is finished? When do I know I've written it? I think a common issue would be, what do I write about? I don't, I want to write a song, but I can only think up boring, oh, well, I used to love her, but it's all over now. Think about how you can make that work, because I used to love her, but it's all over now is one of the most successful songs of the last 60 years. But it's a very simple message. In fact, some of the most successful songs are the simplest songs. Stand By Me, the most successful song, possibly, with the exception of White Christmas, ever written. Certainly one of the most covered songs, Stand By Me. When the night is cold, blah, blah, blah. Very, very simple. The problem that most people have is kind of, why am I doing this? They want to do it, but they don't really understand what it is that's driving them to do this. And I think you have to kind of look inside, and you have to give that some thought. Why are you doing this? And by exploring your feelings, your emotions that are driving you to do this thing, then a lot of the dross tends to fall away, and you'll end up with, the reason. I mean, Jimmy Webb, I was watching him the other night. He talked about the songwriting process as being deeply intimate, private thing, So, you're going inside, you're going into all your private places you wouldn't normally share with people, and you're embarking on this journey where you're going to end up sharing these thoughts, these feelings, these deeply personal, intimate, private feelings. You're going to share them with the world at large, however big that world might be. Depends on its success, but that's what you're trying to do. So it's a good idea to get to that early on. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
Think about that. Think about that fairly early on when you're starting to write the song. And people get very precious about songs, and and I always say, look, you can fill dustbin after dustbin after dustbin with dumped songs. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. There's nobody keeping an eye on you, watching you. Just write. Just get going. Get those feelings out. And some people use the word association method, where you just write. Don't think about what you're writing. Get a piece of paper, get a pencil, start writing, talk like, word.
A stream of consciousness. Yeah.
Stream of consciousness. And try things like that. See what comes out. And, there's so many ways, as I said, there's so many ways, and so little rules. There's no rules at all. So, think about what it is you want to say, how you want to say it.
There's a great book by Jeff Tweedy called How to Write One Song. One of the tips in there.
Really?
He said, it's excellent. It's a really small, you can read it probably in a couple of hours, start to finish. And one of the tips in there is give yourself 15 minutes every day just to write. And just write. And it doesn't matter if it makes any sense. And there'll be a sentence usually that jumps off the page. And I thought that's been a big inspiration to me, actually, just to think, okay, just do it. If you don't do it and you think I'll get round to it, it's your point about motivation and why are you doing it, it's all linked together.
Quite often people will say to me, well, how do you come up with these ideas? And I find that if you, like you said there, if you allow yourself, if you say right now, I'm going to clear my room, I'm going to get my pen and my piano or my guitar or whatever it is, and I'm going to write for 15 minutes, once you make that decision, you'll be really surprised what comes out, and it's the same for me as it is for anybody else. If I, late at night, everybody's gone to bed, I get my guitar, go in the lounge, I start playing. Right now, I'm going to write all this stuff that is underneath, and you're keeping inside. All of it will start to come out, and suddenly you'll find yourself with too much choice, too many things to write about, and then you have to choose which one am I going to go with. It is very much about. I talk about the leap of faith. It's very much about just take that leap. And just, do it and see what happens. And like I say, if it's no good, dump it, and do it again tomorrow night, and just let yourself expand into song world.
Yeah, that's great advice. I've got one final question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, knowing what you know now and everything, the experience that you've taught through, what one piece of advice would you give that young version of yourself that was just starting out into the route of professional music?
I think probably the advice that was given to me very early on, which was follow your heart. You can chase the money, you can chase the fame, you can chase the latest fad, the latest trend, but really the thing that's going to stand you in the best stead in the future is if you go with your heart, go with your instincts, go with your feelings. I've considered myself very fortunate that I can make a living out of being a singer-songwriter, because I know it's very difficult, and I know for most people it's impossible, and I know for me at one point it seemed impossible, but I haven't got there by being commercially minded. God, I'm not commercially minded at all. I've got there by believing in what I do and by following my heart, basically, and doing what is important to me, and what keeps me sane, what keeps me safe, what keeps me healthy is creating music, creating songs, writing songs, and stick with that. Just stick with your believe in what you do.
Reg, that's been a fantastic insight into songwriting, into your career. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, regmeuross.com, my website will give you all the information you need. I'm also on Facebook, Reg Meuross Music. My manager tells me I'm also on Twitter, although I've got no idea. It comes up on my phone, but I have no idea how to use it or what to do. But I have a great manager, Katie Whitehouse, and she runs all of this for me. And so I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. You'll find me all over the place. But the website is the place for gigs, and if you just want to come and get some, it's all. We're doing a 5-day workshop I'm doing a 5-day workshop with Boo Ewerdine in January at the beautiful Halsey Manor down in Somerset. And people are interested in that. They can find all that information on my website.
Great. Thanks ever so much for joining Half Hour Mentor.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ian.
One of the key points I picked up from Reg was how important it is to hone your stagecraft. If your songs have a story to tell, make sure that you bring the meaning to life in your introductions to the songs. It really adds value to the songs for your audience, and ultimately it can lead to extra sales. Having seen and worked with Reg live on a number of occasions, he is, in my opinion, one of the very best at this storytelling approach. His songwriting tips were also invaluable. Interestingly, his advice about writing had great parallels with Paul Finch, the best-selling author who featured in my last episode. Just write and see what happens. You can review and redraft your work later, of course, but if you don't get something on the page, you won't have anything to work with. My thanks go to Reg for his time and great advice. Don't forget, you can have a listen to his music in the Spotify playlist that I've curated, which is linked in the show notes. Don't forget to visit Reg's website, regmeuross.com, to find out more about his prolific career and visit his online shop. Reg is regularly on tour, so do check his gigs page to find out where he's playing near you. There's also a link in the show notes to his Patreon page. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow the series wherever you get your pods, and do review the back catalogue if you are new to the series. You can leave feedback about the episode through social media by searching for Half Hour Mentor or via the email link in the show notes. I'd love to know what you think of these episodes, so please do get in touch and rate and review the podcasts wherever you're listening to them. Thanks for listening, and until next time, bye for now.